Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. Welcome to week 3 of Devtoberfest 2025. I am your host Amar. Today's session is all about testing CAP application with the help of cds.test. I am very happy to welcome our guest speaker Mauricio. He will share the insight about testing the CAP application. So without further ado, let's get started. Over to you Mauricio.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Mauricio Laufer, SAP BTP domain lead for application development. So mostly helping our customers in their BTP journey, pretty much everything related to the development, DevOps, everything in general. So the session today, I'm going to cover the new cds.test package. So this is the preferred way to do test automation in CAP Node.js nowadays. So I will start sharing different screens. So I will just briefly browse through and just show a little bit on the package itself in NPM. And then I will jump into hands-on exercise, which should be quite simple. And then we'll see how this works, and I will share some insights and some of my thoughts on what I like and what I like to do with this package and when I'm doing some automation testing. So let me just change screens. Let me just find the right one now. And then I will start with the package itself. So this is where we can find the package in NPM. So as we can see by the domain or by the namespace here, it's a package that it's maintained by SAP. So we see that this is open source, so people can contribute and ask for changes or do some changes in the code itself. So it's an open source project. You can contribute to whatever you want to do. Some of the changes might be approved, some others might not be approved. Then we have some information in the package here and how to install, how to consume, we should start creating our tests. There's some brief description in here, and most of the information we are going to find in the CAP documentation, which we are very familiar with. So I'm not going to go into the details in there because we have seen that documentation over and over again. So we'll just be in this page for a while, just we can see the main structure when you are testing. And we can see some other information in here as well, and the number of downloads and what is the version that we have for that package now. Just one thing, the package is quite new, so it requires newer CAP versions. So I do believe the minimum version required is 8.8. I'm pretty sure that 9 is the preferred version to work with that nowadays. And okay, so now that we covered this little bit, we can go into the code itself, and then I share my screen again, just the other one. So we're going into my IDE, and I will start a new project in here. So the idea is that we're going to build tests or an application from scratch. So we can see here, I have a blank project, pretty much just my git ignore. And I will start going through some steps just to get these done. So we can start with a new project. So we can start a new CAP project. I will go CDS init. This will create the package JSON and some basic information for the project. So we see what's happening in here, adding Node.js, project created, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to go into details in writing the code and writing a lot of things in there for the application that we're going to test. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add the sample application that we have as part of the CAP package. So we can see that now we have created the serves, the backend. So this is, you might be familiar with, this is the bookstore application. So we have catalog in here, and we have the admin serves in here where we can pretty much manage the books. So we have the database layer here, and in the app, we have our Fiori elements. So nothing new. This is, as you can see this is pretty much the flow in the package. So I'm just adding some of the elements that we're going to use for this test. So with this, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to just install all the dependencies that we have in there. And once we have all the dependencies, what I'm going to do, I'm going to install the test library. Because as you can see here, the sample gave me just the SQLites and the CDS types. I don't have any other dependencies in there. And then for those of you that are not aware, the CDS test package, this is pretty much a spin-off or an extraction from the tests that we had inside or embedded in CAP itself. So rather than being part of the core, the test library, it's a library by itself now, so it's a standalone application. Okay, so now we wait a little bit further for the installation, and I'll just check here what's happening. Still going. So let's wait a little bit more, and then I will install the test. Okay, done. So now I'm installing the tests. So CAP.js CDS test as a dev dependency. So now we see the library in here. And with that, we can start doing some tests with this application. So as I said before, this is a very basic application. It's if we do some npm start here, it's gonna pretty much spin up our server. It's gonna give us the Fiori application. It's gonna give us a regular CAP application, same as you have been doing, same as you have been seeing in your company or in your tests or in your studies. So everything's being loaded in here. So I would just do something else. Rather than just start the server straight away, I'll just kill this one. And I will go in cds REPL. So DJ will be very happy with this session because I'm going to use a little bit of CDS REPL in there. So what we can start doing now, we can get our CDS test started. So this command in here is gonna start our server and give us some extra information or some extra methods and details that we can use for the test. So we see the test has started all the server. So this is running in this local host in here. So now let me just see to see what we have in there. Okay, so the T is the variable that I have created with the result of the test. So I'm pretty much getting everything in there. I could get less or more. So we can see that we have a lot of things in there. So I'm here just doing t.url just to see where we are running. It's pretty much the same information that we have in here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one variable getting the get method from the test library. And then with that, we can start doing things like requesting information to our server. So rather than, for example, if I didn't have the test library, I would need to do some fetch and then have the whole host name in here or something similar to this one. But because we are using the test library and we have started the CDS test, sorry, and we have these in this variable here, we can start using the get or the post or the different methods that we have from Axios. So we have in here, and then this is pretty much what I'm doing. So I'm using the get that we got from the test, and I'm going to request an information or request some resources from my server, from my application. So we can see here that I'm using that method. I'm calling the get, and I don't have the whole host name. I have just the resource path that I want to request because this get is coming from my test library. and the test library knows that the server is this one. This is my host name. I'm testing against this host name. So what I'm doing here, I'm just sending a request, a GET request, getting the response, storing that response, and then I can, for example, see, okay, what is my response? And then we can see that in the response we have status, the HTTP status, the text for that, the headers, and some other informations, and the data that is the response itself as well. So for example, if I go to the response and go to headers, I can see all the headers that I got from that GET request. Okay, so we can also do something like that. So I send my GET request. So this is nothing new. So you probably have seen this. Nothing special, nothing related to or is exclusive to the test library. But we can, rather than getting the whole response, we can get just the, let's say, the construct the response and get just the methods or the properties that we want. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. We're going to get the books and we're going to get just the data, not the whole response. So I won't be able to get the headers. I won't be able to get the status. It's going to be just the data as response. So for example, if I go now, I can see that I have the whole data in there, and then I can go data value and we see the whole response, or I can do data value and get just the first response. So this is just testing our application. So I'm still don't have any automated testing here. I'm just testing. I'm just playing with my application using the test library, just getting familiar with the test library in here. So this is the first step, let's say. Now, the second step, we start going into the automated part. So where we have automated tests that we can run in as part of our project, and especially we can run in CI/CD pipelines. So, and this is what we want. We want to write automated tests, then we can run them in CI/CD pipelines. So every time that we change the project, every time that we change the application, we will run those tests, and then we make sure that we are not going to make any changes that are going to break the application. So we kind of guarantee that whatever we change it's not affecting what we have before. Okay, so with this one, I will kill my REPL session and clear my command line here. And then we can start going into the automated test parts. So for the automated test part, we have three different runners. So the runners are the ones or those tools that are going to execute the tests, and they will be able to test everything, do all the assertions, and prepare the reports and say whether the test has failed or not. So the cds.test today supports out of the box or embedded in the package, the library itself, three different runners. The Mocha runner, which I do believe is one of the oldest runners that we have in Node.js, super famous. It's used everywhere, and it's maintained by some entity. So a lot of different people using for a lot of different projects. Then we have Jest, which is, I believe, if it's not the most famous, at least one of the most famous test runners today. This has been created by Facebook. It's mostly used for testing the front end, but it has been being used to test the backend as well. So a lot of people are using that for testing Node.js applications, and you can use that to test our CAP applications as well. Then last but not least, we have one of the newest players in this space, which is the Node test runner. So far, all the test runners, they were external libraries. They were packages that you would need to install in your project and then configure and run. So with Node test runner, the test parts or the test runner itself, it's part of Node.js. So you don't need to install any external dependencies. You don't need to install any external packages. Node, the test runner, it's part of Node itself. It's in there. You can just start using. You don't need to install anything. And then this is my preferred one. So I do prefer Node Test Runner. So that's the one that I like to use the most nowadays. So I use it to use Mocha, don't use anymore. And I don't like use Jest. And then again, this is my personal view. So my personal opinion. I don't like Jest. A lot of people like, a lot of people don't like. One of the reasons that I don't like Jest is that it pollutes global, and I don't like global pollution. It kind of supports TypeScript and ES modules, but you need to add even more libraries. So Jest by itself has a lot of the dependencies, and then you need to install even more dependencies to work with ESM or with TypeScript. So it's a lot of extra configuration, a lot of extra packages that you need to handle, and then I don't like. I do prefer to just work with Node Test Runner. It just works fine for me. So maybe there are some use cases that you may face that you think just is gonna be better or whatever. But yeah, this is just my opinion. So there are other test runners that you can also use. If we have time, I can show you one. But then these three, Node Test Runner, Mocha, and Jest, they are parts and they are supported by cds.test library. They are the ones supported by CAP itself. All right, so what we are going to do now, I'm going to just auto-generate some tests as we have done uh, with the sample. So I will just run cds add test, and this is gonna create some tests for us. We will see that a new folder will be created on the right side here with some examples. And these examples, they are based on the OData services that we have. So we can see the OData services in here, and then we have one file per OData service. We have the admin service, and then we have the catalog service. So this is pretty much what we have in there. The thing is, the test will also, that CDS add, will also create a new entry in our script. So we have this node test. So this is saying that if we execute npm test or npm t for short, it will execute the node test runner. If we want to use gist, we would need to change that to gist. And if you want to use Mocha, we would need to change that to Mocha, and we would need to handle these external dependencies. So we would need to install Mocha dependency, and we would need to install gist dependency in there. So in here, it's giving us node test runner out of the box. So we just execute node dash dash test. Then, as I said, I'm just going for short in here, npm t, and we see that the tests are going to fail because the data that is provided in here is just generic stuff. So we will get in there in a second. So let's just go back in here. We see that everything is being started, and then we see the tests failing, which is expected. As I said, the tests in here, they are auto-generated. And then the data that we have in here, the IDs and the quantities and whatever else, they're just not matching. So we are just going to find some issues with the data. If we look into the test structure, how we write the test, then we can start looking from the simplest option, which is just a regular node test. So nothing to do with CAP itself. It's just a generic one. So I'm going to create this generic node test. And then we can see that with a generic node test, we have these modules being imported from node core. So we have a node test, we are importing describe and eat, and then we are importing from the assert module, pretty much everything, just the whole assert. And then we have the describe. Describe is kind of a module or a group of the tests that you want to have. Then you have the describe. You may have some description in here, and then we start the block, and then every it is going to be a test. So it can be describe it, or you could just use test like this straight away. So this is another option. So test and it, they are just the same. Test it or it is an alias to test. So when we are using describe, we usually, and that's the preferred way, just a convention, we use describe it and not describe test. But if you want to use describe test, this should work just fine, no problems whatsoever. So let's just get this out of the way in there. And then in here, we could have multiple its, for example, and we could also have multiple describes if you want to have nested tests. So you can see this is nested, and then we close this one, and this should be all right. And then here we start creating our it should be blah, 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 blah. So you got the gist, right? So we can have pretty much as many nested describe as we want to, and then we have all the blocks that we're going to have the real tests. So the real test happens inside it or inside the test block. So there, this is how we go. So I'm going to just delete this and keep this one generic. Then now for the ones that we saw before, I will just going to find the data that I need to use. So this, I'm just copying over. So this should be this expect. So that should be the right information. So let's see how it goes. So for the admin, we should see, let's run again, npmt. So for node test runner, as we have for a lot of command line tools, we also have the option to have a watcher. So I'm not using the watcher here, but we can configure a watcher, and then that should be just right. So it's complaining that the status doesn't exist. Sorry about that. So I forgot to create the status. So I'm getting the data. Oh, sorry. Let me just go back in here. So before fixing this. So I described the generic test, but I didn't describe the Node.js or the CAP Node.js test, the structure that we need, right? So how we are starting our server, how we are starting our test. So we pretty much everything CAP related. We start with require or importing our CDS package. And then from the CDS package, we have this CDS test. And then we start this. And then in this case, because we are in a subfolder, we are inside tests, right? I'm just saying that, yeah, do not start from this folder. I want to start my server from the root folder. So this is pretty much what I'm doing here. This is pretty much the information that I'm passing. And then from these CDS tests, I'm just deconstructing the methods or the properties get, post, expect, and I choose just to get some variables to work through my tests. Then the second one here, I'm just setting some defaults. So all the HTTP requests that we do in CAP, they use this library here. So what I'm doing here, I'm just saying that by default, I want to set the authorization, and the authorization is just this username with this password. That's what I'm going to use by default for this test. If you want to test a different user with a different role, if you want to test different roles, and you should be testing different roles in your application, you just create new tests, and then you change the username and the password that you want to use by default. If you don't want to use defaults, you can also pass as parameters. So that's not a problem whatsoever. So one thing that I'm going to do here as well, I'm going to just change the describe information, because as you can see, the describe OData APIs is the same describe OData APIs for the catalog. So I'm just going to create these admin OData APIs just to make sure that this is a little bit easier to read in the logs that we're going to get in the console. So I start my it block, and then I have my get request in here. So I'm calling the admin service, getting the books in there and passing the ID and title select as the parameter. And then I'm getting the data and the status as a result. And then I just testing expect, and then we can see the expecting here. It could be assert, could be as we have seen here. It could be expect. So it depends on what you want to use, what is your preferences. In this one is just using chai. So chai is pretty much the most used tool for assertions in testing in Node.js. So this is what we are using here. So the format is a little bit different, but the end result is exactly the same. You are asserting some properties and some values just to make sure that everything is what you expect to be. Then here we are saying, I'm expect that data value to contain a subset of these information in here. One ID 251 with a title, the Raven. And I'm also expecting the status to be 200. Okay, so now we can go again and then execute the test again. And at least that one should not fail anymore. So we see that the admin serves was okay. We didn't get any errors. We're still getting some errors from the catalog one. And then we can see here that we have 4 tests in 5 suites, 2 are passing, 2 are failing, and the duration of the tests. And then here we have some more details on the errors. Okay, now we fix the catalog one. And then if you look into the catalog, we have the same structure. We start our CDS variable, then we start the test server, the test application, and then we get and post because we are going to use these methods. And then we also get the expect. This is an assertion library that we're going to use. And we are going to also get this one to set the defaults. Same defaults as before. And as before, that's a generic description. I'm going to change it just to make that a little bit easier. So maybe this is a contribution that you can do. You can just make that a little bit more dynamic. Go to the Git repo, look for where and how this CDS add sample or add test is created and try to make that dynamic. So this would be improvement. All right, so in this catalog, we have 2 tests. We have the first block and the second block. So the first one, we are testing the list of books, and we are pretty much as we have seen before, we are testing the results to see whether we have that subset. So again, I'm just going to get the proper results in there. And then let me just find this one. This is the right data. Same as before. And then again, if we execute, this should give us an error because this one is still broken. So in the admin one, we didn't test, oh, sorry, we tested for status. And in the second one in here for the catalog, we didn't test for status. So the reason is some people say that we shouldn't be testing for a status. Some others say yes, we should. I do like to test the status. I always do that. So I do like to test this one. The thing is, we just need to make sure that we are not testing these as the first one. The reason for that is if we test the status in the first part of the expecting here, so that's the first assertion that we do, we are going to have or we may have a problem because let's say if I'm expecting 200 and I'm getting 500, then it's gonna just say, yeah, the status is different. It's not what we're expecting, but doesn't give us a lot of information. So in this case, we may get more information because the data, the results are not matching what we want. And then afterwards, we test the status. So status should be or could be the last assertion that you do in your tests. So this is if you want to test the status, right? Okay, so for the second one, we are going to just grab the whole thing in here and make these. Let me just get the right one. Oh, just grabbing the whole block just to make that easier. Okay, so for this one, what we are going to test is we are going to test order that we're submitting. So if you're submitting the order for this book with this quantity, we should subtract that from the stock. So the first step that I have in here, it's not required, it's just the way that I'm doing. I'm just checking, okay, I expect that I'm starting the stock with this amount. And then I will post a new order. And after posting this new order, I will check the stock levels again. And the new stock level should be this one. So let me just save, and then we can execute again. Okay, so now we can see that all tests have been successful. We see that everything is passing, nothing has failed. And then we can see all the results in there. So one thing that I don't like much when we are running this as is, and especially in this scenario, we have a lot of, let's say, pollution on the console coming from the CDS server. So what I'm going to do, I will just get rid of this thing, and this should be just no login whatsoever. So what I'm going to do, let me just change this one just to make that a little bit easier for us to read the results, to see all the results that we have in there. So log levels, everything to silent. Yeah, that should suffice. Let's see. Okay, much better. So we can see the admin serves has been completed. Those are the times in there. Then we have the catalog serves. Those are the times in there. Everything has been executed. Everything is fine. And then if we look into these, we can see that, oh, okay, so this is the test name that we have in there. And then you can start looking and matching the results with whatever you have created. All right. So this is the first one. So let me do something else. I will, for example, if we look into these serves, and then we start getting now in a little bit more advanced. If we, not this one. If we look into the catalog serves, when we submit an order, we have this section here where we are going to emit an event. So it's saying that after creating the submit order, we are going to emit this one here. So this, if we are just trying to match and to catch all the requests and assert the results, catching these events might be really hard. So we have different ways and different strategies to do that. And one way that I'm like doing is using mocks and stubs or spies to try to catch what's happening without changing what's happening. So we are going to create a mock to spy on the calls for that event. So what I'm going to do here is going to create into this one. I'm going to create from node test. I'm going to create this mock. So this is again, it's part of standard node test runner. If you're using Jest, it's in a different way. The concept is the same, but you do with a different, different libraries, different methods. Mockup, the same with different things. So what we are going to have in here now is we are going to create a new test, which is going to give us this mock. So what I'm doing here, I'm connecting to the catalog service, and then I'm creating an spy into the catalog service for the method emit, which is what we have in here. This coming from the catalog service in here, that's my class. That's the method that we want to spy on. So we go in here. So this is my spy. It's not going to do anything. I could using my spy, or I could mock the whole thing saying every time that I call these methods or I call this property, this should be the response. So for example, every time that I call emit, I should fail. Every time that I call a list of books, I should return 3 entries, hard-coded, things like that. So those are the reasons that we use spies, mocks, and stubs. We pretend that we are going to call something. This is especially useful when we are calling external APIs that we don't have any control on. So we can say, okay, I want to test this API returning success. I want to test this API returning errors, for example. And then you create a mock, you do the stub and do whatever you need to do with this. Then here, we are just posting against the submit order again. So the same book, 10 is the quantity. And then now what we're going to do, we are going to assert the values that we have in the spy. So we go into spy, and then we have the mock, and then how many calls we have, and what are the arguments in these calls. And then what we are doing here is, okay, I have just one call, so I'm getting 0 index. I have just one argument, or just the first argument that I want, so 0 index, to be order book, which is this value in here. So this is what we want to make sure that, okay, I want to make sure that this method has been called with this argument, in here. So what we are going to do now, we run our test again, and hopefully everything works. And then if everything works, we are going to see something else. So yeah, so this is the should emit event order book. Okay, all green, green is good. So we have a look in here. So this is the test that we have created. And then just if we want to see what's happening there, let's just create a console here really quickly. Just get out. So I just want to show you the structure, what we have in the spy mocks in there. We should see some entry. Ah, we didn't see anything in there. So it's just getting not. So let's try again. And if not, let's just move on. Yeah, much better. Okay, so we can see that we have an array for all the calls. And then the first call is the one that we got, the 0, 1. And this is the first argument, order book. And then the second argument would be the object that we passed in here. So if we go back in there, order book, it's the first argument, and the object is the second argument. So we could assert and just make sure that the properties, all the properties and arguments are exactly what we want to be. But just for the sake of simplicity, I'm just checking the order book. So it might be a little bit advanced for some of you, for some of others, you have been doing this for forever, so nothing new. But yeah, this is pretty much how we do mocks and stubs in the tests, especially when we are doing with test runner, Node.js test runner. Okay, with this out of the box, we have something else to cover now, which is test coverage. So what we are going to do now, we are going to have a look into how we check test coverage. So let me just go in here. we can see we have the tests in here, the results, but I don't know how much of coverage I have. So I have a lot of, am I covering all the scenarios, all my codes? I don't know. I have no idea. So what we're going to do in here, we are going to create one entry passing some parameters in there. And then let me just remove that console to avoid some pollution. And then let me just kill this. And then with this one, we're going to have this test coverage script in here. And with this one, we are going to pass this flag in here. It's still experimental, but works just fine. So don't be afraid, just go for that, use it. So now we are going to npm run test cov, and we should see the test coverage, the results in there. So the format will be a little bit different at the ends, and then we can see that for this folder, those are the files being used. And for this folder, those are the files that are being used and their coverages. And then in here we have the coverage for all the files. If you want, you can include or exclude files from the report. So for example, I don't want to have my test files being part of the test coverage. So I want to remove everything that's in the test. I want to have just what we have in the service folder, for example. Then in here we have coverage by line, coverage by branch, and then coverage by functions. They may differ, as you can see here, they are different. They are not exactly the same. So each one in here will have a different approach in how things are being covered. So yeah, we can have a look into the documentation to see all the details, but this is basically line by line, all the different branches that you have, all the different functions that you have in there. So just the test coverage itself, it's good because it gives us some information in saying almost all my code is being tested or it's covered somehow in the tests. It doesn't mean if I have 100% coverage in my tests, it doesn't mean that I have a bug-free application. So for sure, everybody aims to have a higher coverage number in there, but 100% doesn't mean that it's going to be bug-free. And sometimes getting 100%, it's really hard. And then you need to start considering what is the effort to get this 99% or 100%? Is that really worth the effort? Maybe it's not because it's just some crazy edge scenario that you just want to cover. But maybe if you set, let's say, I want all my tests to be over 80%, over 90%, might be a little bit better. In this case, we have some files or yeah, some coverage in 96%. If we look into branches, 86%, but nothing is failing. If I want to set the threshold, then again, I need a different flag to test this one. And then I need to say what I want to cover. So is my threshold, and then let me just go back in here. So is my threshold per function, per line? What is that number? So in this case, I want my functions to be over 95%. So this is my coverage. Let me just go back in here. If my function coverage is under 95%, my test should fail. It should not pass. So right now it's passing, it should not pass. So I set at 95%, so it should fail. So let's do that again. npm So we can see the flags at the top. All the tests were okay, they passed. However, we have an error because the threshold has been set to 95 and my function coverage doesn't meet the threshold. My function coverage is 93 whatever percent. So if I'm running that in my CI/CD pipeline, this should fail, and then somebody should act on that. And then probably somebody would need to increase the coverage and assess whatever the changes have been implemented. But this is how we make sure that we do have test coverage and that we do have these as part of our CI/CD pipelines. Very important. We need to have this. This is how we control what we have seen, what we have tested. Again, doesn't mean that it's 100% bug free, but it means that at least those scenarios have been tested. At least those scenarios are okay, they are fine. Okay, so one thing that I like to do in my tests is making sure that all the tests that or the services that have um, authorizations or they require authentication, they are not public. They do have that requirement in there. So this is something that I like to do. So we can see in here, and then just for the sake of showing different examples, I have assert rather than the expect coming from the test. So I have assert coming from the node core itself. Then I start my CDS and I start my test library, my server. And then I send my requests to my admin service. And then in there, because remember this one here, I was passing the full authentication, passing this user and password. But what we have in here, I'm not passing any user, I'm not passing any credentials. So I expect this to fail, and this should fail with 401 unauthorized. So this is what I'm doing here. So I'm using the assert, and then I'm expecting the response to reject, and I expect that rejection to be 401. So let's see how does that look like. I will just run, yeah, let's run with the coverage again. Why not? And then we should see that these OData APIs know of it's okay. But if we change in here, for example, let's say it should return 200, just for the sake to see that failing. And then we see that, oh, okay, then we were expecting to have that response from the service, and we got something else. And then we can see here that's the actual. So we got 401 and we were expecting 200. Then, but yeah, just one example. So this is something that I like to do just to enforce, or not to enforce, but to make sure that the APIs that should be private, they are private. So I have seen before a lot of APIs or data services being published in CAP where we didn't have any required or authenticated users. So people were expecting that to be private and they were public. So this is one way in capturing that information and making sure that all the APIs that we're exposing, you are exposing them as private. So you just test, okay, is this, if I don't pass any credentials, if I don't pass any user, am I going to get unauthorized or am I going to get access to that? And then in this one, testing just basic authentication, but you could test roles and access as well. So do I have permission to create data? Do I have permission to delete data? So these things you can also test with cds.test library. So very powerful, helps a lot, especially on this part of the security side. All right, so Ryan, I want now to just show something else. So we have been doing these tests in here just with the Node.js part, but let's say I do have a Fiori part in here, right? So let's pretend that in my Fiori application, I have a test. And let's say I have my VDI5 test or whatever test I have in there. And I have something like this. Okay. And then okay, let me just go in this again. I'm going to run my test again. And then we'll see that we have something failing, right? And then we'll see that we are getting that test file that it's inside my app. So this is not coming from the service, is not coming from the test folder, it's coming from my Fiori application. So if I do have test files for my Fiori applications, I don't want to test them in the same way that I'm testing my backends, right? They might have different rules, they might have different things that should be applied, they might be started in a different way, whatever. So if I want to make sure that I'm getting just the files that I want to test, we need to pass another parameter for our test. So when we go into our tests in here, we can say, this is the folder or this is the pattern that I want to use to catch all my tests. And then the same for this one. So I'm just saying that I only get tests from the test folder, whatever test.js. And then if I run again, now it should be all right because it's ignoring the tests that we have in the app side. It's failing because of the coverage, so let's just run without the coverage part. And then you can see the parameters in there with the flags. And now everything is good again because we are not testing anything from the app, Fiori app that we have in there. It's just the CAP application, just our Node.js part. So pay attention to this. Maybe you face this problem. Maybe you see this. Then just make sure that you are not testing this one. I really quickly want to just go and then install Jest, and then we can just run a very quick test with Jest. So while it's installing, I'm going to create the scripting here. So this should be this, and this will be test Jest. It is still installing. Yeah, as I said, Jest has a lot of dependencies. It's a massive package. Again, I don't like using it. People like it. So whatever, just use whatever you like. Just use whatever works for you. So then just to, while this is loading, let me just start a new terminal in here. And I'm going to prepare something for the last step, which is going to be creating our CI/CD pipeline. Just one very simple example. So I'm going to use, again, another command that we have in the CDS. So I'm going to use the CDS add GitHub actions while we wait for Jest to be installed. So this should create GitHub actions for us. And then whenever we push our code to GitHub, we should see, so this is the folder that has been created with the GitHub action in here. I'm going to change from self-hosted because I don't have a self-hosted one. I'm just using my personal account. I'm poor. I don't pay for GitHub actions. I just use the free stuff. So I'm just starting. I'm not going to go into the details, but what we are doing here, we are starting GitHub actions, and then we are installing the dependencies for our project, and then I'm running my test command, which is what we have in here. So this is what we have in our GitHub action. So we will see that later. So let me just close this one. So Jest has been installed. So let's now run Just. And then if we look into the test structure that we have in here, it's mostly the same. And then I will tell you why. So Jest, again, it's all about globals. Everything's global, and Jest also use describe and it. So we don't need to import things as we have in here when we are doing Node test runner. Why we didn't need to do the import for describe and it in here if you were using test runner? Because when we started our CDS test, this has populated and loaded the describe and the it for us from test node test runner. So we don't need to import them because cds.test is doing that for us. So in here, I'm executed CDS, our jest test. We can see pretty much everything being executed in there. And the same issue that we have before, getting things from Fiori applications, the test that we have in there. We can also for sure pass parameters and patterns saying only get tests from this folder or with matching this pattern. We didn't do this, we're just running as is. So it's just running pretty much everything and getting a lot of crazy errors in there. So just to show you that we don't need to do a lot of things with Jest to start working with. We can just pretty much reuse the services and the things that we have created in there. So let me just delete this one just to see whether Jest will work. And while we run that one, we are going to just push everything to our Git, or at least to my Git. So git add, let's commit this message, and let's git push. And let's have a look into how gist is going. So it's executing. You can see that it takes much longer than test runner, node test runner in this case. And yeah, again, I don't know why. Sometimes this is just weird. As I said, I don't use it. I don't like it. I prefer to use other test runners. But yeah, so that's it. I've used test, as I said, Node test runner. If I have the opportunity, I use vtest, which I think it's great. In my opinion, it's the best test runner that we have today, but it's not part of CDS tests. So I'm not going to show in here, but it's also possible to test your CDS applications with vtest or with Japanese or whatever other test library that we or test runner that we have out there. Okay, so let's see. It has been pushed. So now I'm going to share a different screen. So let me just stop this one and move to the other one. And then here we have Git REPL. So this is public, will be in there. So I will keep this as is. You can have that as a reference. I'm going to refresh to see the changes that we have pushed. So you can see has been just pushed. This is our look at my cool CDS tests. And then you can see all the things that we have created in there. But most importantly, we have GitHub Actions, and we see this GitHub action in here, and this is passing. So if you look into this one, we'll see pretty much all the results for our CDS test. And then, for example, if we want to change, and let's do this with this one, for example. And then let's say it's equal 1 equal 2. So this should fail, right? So let's just test fails now. And then git push. And I just realized that I'm sharing the browser and not the command line, but that's all right. So we can see that I just pushed this test fail. It's been started. So we see that has just been pushed. It's queued. Let me just zoom in. It's still running and it has just failed. So the first step, all the steps went well until it failed. And then we can try to find where it failed, what happened, and then we can see some of the assertions being executed in here. So expected to got one, or sorry, well, yeah. So it was one and expected two, and it failed because it didn't match, right? So this is pretty much what I wanted to share with you. Again, it seems to be a lot of things, but it's just the beginning. It's a lot of things when we are testing, when we are doing automated tests, we have a lot of options. We can do a lot of nice things. As I showed before, and one thing that I think is very important and super nice, it's mocking, stubbing, spying. So this is the superpower that we have to mock whatever we want to mock, even new modules that we want to use. We can mock their responses, not just APIs, but a whole Node.js modules and libraries we can do. And then running automate tests in our project, it's fine. Local, it's okay. But again, then the superpower is when we combine automated tests with CI/CD pipelines. So it doesn't matter whether it's a CI/CD pipeline running inside your BTP as the CI/CD serves that we have in BTP, or if you're running in GitHub Actions or GitLab or Circle CI, whatever is the tool that you are using to run your CI/CD pipelines, you can use them with your CDS tests to cover and to test and make sure that your CAP applications are running just fine. And then whenever you make any changes, you are not going to break anything. You are going to just make everything run smoothly. So I think from my side, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to share with you in this session. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to myself on socials or even in the community. Yeah, we can exchange some ideas and work together and making this plugin or this package even better. Thanks, everyone. Bye.